Welcome back to the kitchen build, everyone. Super excited to be at this point. We are going to be covering the appliances this time. It's one of the last things on the list before the kitchen is done and functional. So I'm very excited about that. We have the big fridge. We have the little fridge slash freezer, dishwasher, range, and because it's sort of in the same category, we'll also wrap up the appliance garage in this episode. Now for this kind of grouping of appliances here, all three of these are going to look like pieces of the cabinetry. So that means, of course, before we can get these things installed in here, somebody's got to make something. So here is what the front of the dishwasher is going to look like. It'll have a panel applied to it, so it looks identical to the cabinetry on this side. So we have this nice symmetry here. The large fridge gets this door panel on it with the diamond detail in it. This is all a V-groove paneling look, which is going to kind of look like the door to the pantry. And then for the drawer unit in the island, we have V-groove paneling as well here, and the drawers are going to look like they're kind of part of that V-paneling facade. Now there's two kind of categories here. We have the painted faces and then the wood finish faces. So I'm going to get started today on the painted faces, and I'll probably take a look at the appliance garage as well because it has a giant painted face that looks almost identical to this giant door, which is going to go here. And because the dishwasher panel is a little more complicated, it has more pieces to make up this faux rail, drawer, rail, door, rail, cove mold. There's a lot of pieces that go on that panel. I'm going to start with that one. So here is the door panel that we made back in the doors video, and it's still oversized and everything. So the general kind of plan here is I'm going to add the rails, the fake drawer front, and the cove mold onto the top of this thing, and we're going to run them all along, and then we can trim it down to final width at the very end. So a couple of things. First, this thing is still, again, oversized, so I do need to remove whatever material I need to on the top and bottom to make this thing look like it is inset between the two rails. And then for the rails, we're going to put that shadow line on there so it looks like the actual gaps that are around this panel, so it looks like an actual door. The gaps that I'm using on all of my doors and drawer fronts are smaller than my smallest blade, so I can't just run a groove in this big piece. I have to actually make these all separate pieces and put a rabbet on the edge of either adjoining piece to create that shadow line. So that's going to run through right now. We're going to go through and trim the door, make the bottom rail, the mid rail, and the top rail, and the drawer front. So I got everything clamped up, and I just checked to make sure that all of my spacings are correct and everything looks like it's lining up pretty well. And I'm going to do a little bit of an experiment with this one. Last time when I did the spice rack pull-out thing, I primed the valley areas down in here, and that made painting a lot easier. I primed them before I glued them together, which made the paint process go a lot easier, and it made the painting, or the appearance of paint down in those valleys really crisp and clean. The kind of issue with that is it doesn't really accentuate the fact that is like a shadow line of like a void. It just looks like it's a nice painted crevice. So on this one, I'm going to just glue it up like this without doing any pre-priming into any of the shadow lines, and we'll see if maybe that makes it look more realistic, because it'll be kind of a crappy paint job down in those valleys versus a perfect paint job if I do it the way I have been doing it. So I have this thing trimmed to width, just a little bit oversized still. So it's not gonna quite go in here just yet. And I'm gonna start working on getting this thing actually sides to the opening. I have some blocks here to get this thing parallel at the same elevation as this lower rail here, so that all of my rails end up matching up, because this top one I made extra wide to cover this gap in here. So the first thing I'm gonna do is actually get the top cut to size so that it's in the right place. I can already tell it's tapered. So I'm just gonna mark where it needs to be as far as height on the left and the right. And we'll go make this tapered cut, and that should allow us to get it in past the countertop and start dealing with how it's gonna look along the sides for our gaps. So now it fits in here and the angle looks pretty good. So I have a consistent gap up there. Not big enough quite yet, but at least I know that cut angle is correct. Now so working on this side, I have a little bit of a taper cut here too. So I got a bit under a 1/16 of an inch gap down there, and I have a touching there. So we'll taper this cut to get it nice and parallel and set our gap at the same time. And then we'll deal with this side doing exactly the same thing. Okay, I'm really happy with the alignment of the gaps and everything. I am a 1/16 of an inch oversized, so I'm going to attach this piece of cove bolt to the top, and then we can trim a 32nd off each edge, which will flush up the cove bolt to the panel, clean it up, and then set my final gaps for each side. I'm going to install this, at least tack it on here with the panel in place, so I can make sure I get this cove mold at the correct elevation, because I want the line from this cove mold over here to line up with the line on this side. I don't want this to be offset. Of course, this is going to set this tight to the countertop, which is not what we want, but we'll set the gap on the top with the cove mold installed, and we'll have the gap basically cut off the little top piece of the actual cove. So all the lines, everything must line up. All the lines will continue all the way across, and it should look fairly seamless. If you set this gap and then set this thing down low, it's not going to align with that one. So this is the continuation of the molding line over here and over here. Okay. So now this molding is attached, and I need to remove a 1/32 of an inch from each edge and remove about a 1/16 from the top. Now, this is not geometrically a parallelogram. These two edges and top and bottom are not parallel. So if I want to remove them, I can't just set the fence to whatever and run them, because that would undo all of the angle adjustments I already did. So you have to reference the edge you're cutting off to remove it, which you could do on the jointer. That's what the jointer does. You're referencing off the edge that's getting cut the whole time, so you don't change the angle relative to the other edge. But this is a good mix of end grain and long grain and all kinds of weird stuff the jointer wouldn't probably like cutting through all of this. So I'm going to do a jointer type cut, but I have the table saw set up to do that. So I have the blade buried in this auxiliary tall fence, And then I have this little shim back here. This is a 32nd of an inch thick, and that is in line with the outside face of the blade. So now when I run a board across here, it'll get cut by the table saw blade, and then the gap that's been removed, the amount of material that's removed by the blade, gets supported back here. That's a jointer. That's a jointer on a table saw. So I can run the two edges just like that, and then for the top, I'll just run it twice to get a 16th. So here is the completed dishwasher panel, and yes, indeed, not pre-painting the inside of those seams there does make a difference. It makes it look like a bigger shadow line than over on the spice rack pull-out thing. If I look in there, it looks like absolute garbage, but that's the whole point, I guess, that it doesn't look that good up close, but from afar, you get those deeper shadow lines. So we're not really sure what we're going to do as far as the handles and the pulls on this. If we're going to keep the symmetry and do the same thing as over here on the trash pull-out with a knob and a pull here, or if we're going to break symmetry and go for functionality and just put a pull on top. Don't really know yet, but don't have to decide that quite yet. That's that one. Let's do the giant fridge panel next. So here's a look at the finished panel. I know my opening is 89 inches tall. I need to figure out how far off the floor I can make the panel. So I went over here to the instructions, and they have this diagram here that shows you that you can actually adjust the final position of that panel. You can go anywhere from 6 inches off the floor down to 2, but if you go down that far, you need some other accessory. But if you keep it at a standard 4-inch, which is what I'm doing in the rest of the kitchen, I don't need to buy a separate thing, and that's kind of, I guess, more of a standard way of doing it. So the panel will end 4 inches from the floor, and then I also need some kind of toe kick filler thing, which will go right in here, but that's something else I can worry about later. I'm more concerned with getting this panel set up. So here's my offcut that I had set aside for some time. I'm just going to cross cut it down a little bit to get some of the weight off of it and make it a little bit shorter so I can go through the table saw a little bit easier. And then we'll rip it to final width. And before I cut it to final length, we're going to run all the V-grooves. That way if the router does anything weird towards the ends of the cuts, like tips off or something, I don't have to worry about it because I can trim all that off if anything happens. So there are the V-grooves all patterned out, and I'm ready to chop these things down to final length. So I have a couple inches extra here, so like here you can see it kind of wavered a little bit, so there's like a little bit of a dip right there, and then as I was doing this little edge profile, I accidentally came around the corner. So I have 2 inches of extra length here, so we can trim off any kind of weirdness that happens at the start and end. And then we can get that diamond pattern laid out and cut. Okay, the plans request that the diamond is 5 feet off the floor to the center line and in the middle V-groove. So that would be, well, we're gonna make that one that side there at the bottom. So 5 feet minus 4 inches, 56 inches. That is our horizontal center line. Right around there. That's where it's going to go. The last thing is going to be to drill the holes to mount the handle and figure out where to put it top to bottom. So I kind of want it to be like somewhere in this area. So if I grab it, put it on here, looks like the center, kind of the center of the bottom hole is at 37 inches off the floor. So the bottom of the handle is at about 36 inches off the floor. So that's where I'm going to put it first, top to bottom goes, and then it is centered in the first V-groove paneling. So I gotta remember, I gotta take it off 4 inches right there. Something like that. All right, that takes care of the big fridge panel. Let's move on to the small fridge panels next. So here is the fridge unit in here, and this is a fridge drawer, it's a freezer drawer, and then the facade on here is basically like the dishwasher where you have from the countertop down to the toe kick as a single look. So the rails, the cove mold will extend over here onto the panel that goes onto the fridge. So there's a few different ways you can go about doing this. It's going to be a V-groove paneling in here, so it's going to look very much like the end panels. So if I just made solid wood V-groove panels, glue them together, then attach them to the fridge, that will work, but we're going to have an issue with wood movement. The panel is going to expand and contract a lot because it's 2 feet wide, so your gaps on either side are going to vary quite a bit, and things are going to look inconsistent depending on what time of year you're kind of looking at it. You could further take that and kind of mitigate that a little bit with solid wood panels by controlling where the wood movement's going to go, just like we did on the end panels. All of those pieces are fixed in the center, so they expand and contract independently outward towards each other, utilizing that expansion gap between them. The issue I have with doing that is going to be containment and keeping them all kind of together and floating. On the top and bottom, we have the rails, which we could use to contain those panels to keep them where they're going to be. But along the bottom here, or the top of this one and the bottom of this one, we need something else to help contain that. We could do like an inlaid metal strap in the back that has, slotted holes in it that allow the panels to move. But the issue there is that across the seam, as things kind of move over time, the V-grooves might have a tendency to misalign and get a little bit weird over time. So you can look at doing something that is not a solid wood solution. So then you might be thinking, well, I can take a piece of plywood and route some V-grooves in it. But the issue there is that the V-grooves themselves, you're going to see all the plies, and it's going to look really weird. It's not going to look like solid wood down in there. So another solution would be to have a stable piece of sheet goods for core, and then you would laminate some edge band pieces onto the edge, and then you could laminate the surface with some kind of veneer or something, and these laminates would land right where your V-grooves would go. So as you're cutting the V-grooves, you'd be cutting through solid wood all the way back, but you still have the stability of a solid core. Now the problem I have with that is that the rest of the island is not faux V-paneling. It is true real V-paneling, and I really want this to match and look exactly like the other V-paneling. The difference is that on the true V-paneling, you have a drop down into the expansion gap, whereas with the faux stuff, it's just a V, a flat, and it comes back up again. The true stuff, it comes down, it comes straight down across the expansion gap, back up again, and then on a V. So it looks very different than the faux stuff. So I haven't found a router bit that makes a true V-panel faux look that I haven't found yet. I haven't seen it out there. I'm kind of sick of buying custom bits for things. So we're going to do something a little bit crazier. We're going to do something basically like this, but we're going to make every panel independently. Instead of making this as one single unit, we can make every single piece independently, so it'll look pretty much exactly like a real piece of V-paneling with an MDF core. It'll have a actual solid wood edge where the tongue and groove gets routed on, and then we can actually glue all the pieces together to make our actual panel, because we don't have any wood movement problems because the core of the V-groove will be stable, and we can just glue them together and slap them on. So that's the general gist of things. And I'm also leaning towards doing this because I want to do sort of a veneered look of things. So I have this one block that was an offcut from doing the rest of the island, and I want to do sequential panels. So as you're looking across there, every single piece is sequential left to right, and we can do that by resawing and creating veneer out of our giant block. So that's what I'm going to do first, is resaw some veneer, make sure I have enough slices to make this design work. So here are the finished veneers. I have a veneer I made for the back. This is just some extra stock that doesn't matter because you never see it. So I made that. It's the same thickness as the main stock. And what I love about this is the progression as you go through. You can see like the subtle changes from left to right. So at least that's the general concept that I'm going for with this. These are still over width, like 7.5 inches wide. And the final paneling is going to be a coverage of just under 6 inches. So I'm probably going to cut this part off. And then I wasn't planning on using the knot. I was just want to see how it would look just for my own satisfaction, I guess. But the final part we're going to use is probably going to be like right in here with the knot side facing down. So you get some of this figure and stuff that comes off the top of the knot without having an actual knot like in the field the whole way across. But otherwise, I think this is going to be a pretty cool, promising concept. So with the veneers cut, now I can work on the actual core, which will be in here. So you can see that the section I'm going to use, it goes from a kind of a plain sawn orientation to a rift sawn orientation. So the edge banding that I'm going to put onto the core MDF, one piece will be a plain sawn, the other piece will be rift sawn. That way, as you look at the edge, the grain kind of meshes. Because on the sides of the panel, if we don't have any V-groove, we'll have a chamfer and it goes into just a solid side. So we want to have the grain somewhat match as you're coming across the edges of the boards. So that's what I'm going to do there. This is all of the offcuts from making the leg assembly and the end panels. So I can source all my little strips from this, and then I'll be done with all this stuff and I'll never have to have this stuff in my shop anymore. I've been keeping this here for this exact reason, so I can source whatever I'm going to need to make this whatever panel stock. So I'm going to go through and make my little edge banding pieces. We'll glue them to the sides of the edges of some MDF, and then once those are dry, we can run that whole assembly through the planer to get our core down to the thickness that we need. So when we add the two veneers, our panel ends up at the finished thickness that we want. So for the lamination, for the glue up, whatever you want to call it, the glue lamination thingy, I'm using epoxy. A couple of pros to using epoxy for this. First off is the working time. I'll have enough time to get a bunch of these assembled and into the press, before the glue starts to set. So that's a nice plus. The other positive thing about using epoxy is that it is not water-based, so it's not going to cause my veneers to start curling up on me, which just becomes a huge pain in the butt trying to get those into, a form, a vacuum bag, a press, whatever. It just gets super obnoxious when those veneers are trying to curl up and out and away, and it makes them far more prone to sliding around. And as far as sliding around goes, I have a pin nailer here. So I will pop a couple of pin nails into this thing, just on the top and bottom in an area that's going to get cut off anyway, just to hold everything together, keep them from slipping and sliding around. So that's it. I think the only thing I got to keep track of at this point is which piece of edge banding is my plain sawn and which side is my rift sawn, so that I can put these together in a way that makes sense. Back veneer doesn't really matter that much. It's the face veneer that I am the most concerned about. Okay, I thought I was going to do all of them right now, but I'm running out of time. I have to take the kids to karate in 10 minutes, so I'm not going to have any more time to get any more of these assembled, so I'll do 3 more here tomorrow, which isn't a big deal. Let me get this thing in the clamps here, and then See you tomorrow, I guess. It's weird. All the other ones, the pin nail went through all of them. Whatever. So for clamping calls for the whole stack, we got the bench as the bottom call. And then I got this other piece here, which is another bench top. That was my call for the top. Ugh. And we just clamp these together and that's it. There's a common answer to a common question, or I guess an answer to a common question. What's up with the split in the middle of the bench? Doing weird stuff like this. Yeah, okay. Okay, there are all of the blanks out of the form, all laminated and ready to go. So now I can start to get them all cleaned up and run my tongue and groove profile on them. One thing I'll note of something I did here is I didn't actually take the veneers down to their final thickness. I just cleaned up enough to get one side fully cleaned up for the glue surface that goes down facing the core, so the reverse side of the veneer. That way, now at this step, now it's all laminated as a solid piece, I can run the whole piece through the planer, just skim that last little bit off. I knew I was going to have some epoxy fills to do anyway, so I can clean up the epoxy fills and take the veneers down to their final thickness. Now they're laminated down to the substrate, and that's why I can keep using the planer to surface and dimension that veneer down. Once it starts getting really thin, the planer can be a little bit too aggressive, and if you have any grain run out or like it hits a knot or something like that, you can cause the veneer to basically explode in the planer and ruin your workpiece. So if you're going really thin, you would typically want to clean it up with a drum sander, which is, at least in my opinion, super slow and not nearly as efficient as using the planer. So this allows me to use the planer for the full dimensioning and not just use the planer for like the initial dimensioning and then go to the drum sander and spend my whole life standing at a drum sander running veneers through it. Okay, so with that kerf removed there, these should fit fairly snug right now. So at this point, I can come through and I can remove the little bit of material along the top here of the cove mold, and I also need to set my gap. Well, what I'm going to do here, because I don't want to see the exposed MDF core on this top drawer, we're going to go down the shop and we'll inlay a chunk of end grain in here to kind of mask this a little bit. It won't be perfect because we'll still have a little bit of a line around the perimeter, but at least the MDF will be gone, and we'll see end grain on the top of that drawer, and it'll look a little bit nicer. When I inlay that and I trim it all flush, I will set my gap here, so I'll have a little bit of material to remove my gap and trim my end grain up, and that'll be all set to go. It's looking really good. Now, as far as this guy goes, we're not really sure what we want to do with this cavity quite yet. The plan was for a 5-inch drawer, which is the same as all the other ones, and then like a door face down here. But we're not really sure what we want to put here, what we want to use this space for, so we're going to wait to actually decide on that until we move into the space, because I can't really cut this and put it back together again. Once I make those cuts, that's kind of what this has to be. So we'll come back to that in a future episode, but otherwise, back down to the shop to do some end grain inlay. Okay, so there is how that looks with the end grain veneer on there. It's not perfect, but it's pretty darn close, and it makes it look kind of a lot like real wood. So that takes care of the 2 drawer fronts for the fridge. These can go off for finish, and then we will install these when we start installing panels on all the appliances. It's a big day. It's finally install day for some of the appliances. We have the range and the big fridge going in today. The appliance people are sending out 2 crews. We have a moving crew coming this morning to carry them in, and then an install crew will be coming by to install the fridge. So that's exciting. We we ordered those long time ago. They took a long time to come in, and it'll take me a long time to be ready to get to the point where we can actually install them. So it's a pretty exciting and big milestone day for the project, which is super awesome. So to save the moving crew a little bit of work, the fridge and the range have been stored in the barn since they arrived. So I'm doing this morning. I'm going to move them onto the deck so that they don't have to move them from the barn into the house. Save them a lot of steps and a whole flight of stairs. So there's the fridge in the surround. The range is there, ready to get hooked up and slid in. A couple of things on this. One thing I didn't quite realize is that when you make the opening taller, you end up with this dead space up there. So I should have put a filler on top there so you don't see like a big hole up there when you open the door. I don't know if I care about that or not, or if I'll put something up there. That's the least of my concerns right now. So they got it installed. They got it plumbed up so it's nice and parallel to the front of the opening, so it's ready for the panel to go on. I also learned today that the install that I paid for does not include installing this panel. So that's what I'll be doing next, is getting this panel installed onto that fridge. So the way this is supposed to work is that the fridge panel gets attached to the door through these little holes here with these screws. And there is a bigger one up top here on both sides. So the idea is that you put those two screws into the panel first in exactly the right spot, and then you can put the door up there and hang it on those two, and then install the rest of the screws from the other side with the door open. So you got to get the holes for these in exactly the right spot. And there is this template here, which I may or may not use because my opening is a different height than standard. So we'll see how this goes. How the hell does this do this? There's nowhere to grab. I think that size up. Okay. Okay, so I got the panel sitting in the correct position, left to right, and in pretty close position, like up and down both sides to get the tilt, to get my lines pretty well consistent, and then I can start using the actual adjustments on here. So this one here in the middle, this is a cam, and it lifts this bracket up or down, depending which way you want to go. So you can make an adjustment here for up and down, and then there are cams on top and bottom, which allow you to push the panel in and out to get it in plane with your surround. So at this point, I got it in the right spot. I'm doing all of my securements, and then I can mess with the in and outs because it's not sitting nice and flat in the surround. Okay, so this is in behind, so this corner has to come out. This one's pretty well flush, maybe back a hair, and this is okay down here. So let's mess with these cams now. Okay, there is the fridge all installed and functional, with the exception of the toe board, toe kick board, or whatever. I haven't made that yet. I'll do that when I make all the other ones. And then we'll go on to this thing here. These little magnets allow you to stick your kickboard to this thing, and this thing just gets mounted to the bottom there of the fridge, and it gives a fully built-in look. So that's that. Fridge is done. Big fridge is done. Next is the range. I already went ahead and installed the cord onto it. I need to get the anti-tip bracket in the right spot on the floor, and then our plumber Mike is coming by today as well to do a lot of other stuff, as well as he'll have the whip for the rest of the gas line. I get this hooked up, and then once that's hooked up, this can be slid into place and adjusted so it's the right height and nice and level. Okay, the range is installed. I'll have to pull it back out again once we figure out what we're going to do for the backsplash. But next, I'm going to get these panels here attached or installed to this drawer thing. This one makes me a little more nervous because there is, as far as I can tell, there's no adjustability. They give you some templates for the hole locations or where they're supposed to go. But if something is a little bit awry, I don't believe there's any way to adjust things. So we'll see. I'm going to go through and use these templates and drill the mounting holes into the back of these panels. And if something doesn't work out, I'll just plug the holes and start over again. So the way that these panels mount is in here behind the gasket. You pull this thing out of the way, and then there is a little detent here that allows you to put the screw through. It just has to break through, whatever the heck that means. I don't know if that means to like take one of the screws and shove it through there, or to like drill that out. I don't really know. I'm gonna go with drill out. I think I'm just gonna do my own thing here. I'll poke these screws through the front a little bit, and the gasket kind of hold it in place, and then I can set the panel where it needs to go and mark the hole location. So it should make lining things up a little bit easier, because my panels, what I kind of realized is I made them a little oversized, so that template doesn't actually work with the panels that I made, without having to like offset them from the edges the right distance or whatever. So I think this might just be easier. Okay, I got the screws sticking out, and actually they push out further because I closed the door. So I have to be a little bit careful here. Figure out the left to right position here. Okay, I got it where it's gonna be. Yeah, pancake. Okay, I think I'm happy with where it is. Push it into the screws. Okay, there's our hole locations. Okay, let's see what that does. I think the adjustability you do have is the fact that these things are oversized and they kind of poke through foam. So you can kind of tweak it, I guess. Like somehow it's got cocked sideways and way the heck over. So hopefully I can loosen the screws, and it's gonna be hard because you can't really you can't adjust it in place. Like you have to kind of guess where it was, pull it out, shove it over, and put it back again. Okay, that really didn't work at all, I'd say. The whole panel is too low, like a 1/16 of an inch too low down here, and it's even too much more lower down there, and it's cocked, so it's a good chance that I will be filling those holes and retrying that one, unless I somehow manage to get it to adjust. But I am going to move on to this top one and try a different strategy. I'm going to try sticking this thing to the drawer, clamping it in place, and then drilling the pilot holes with the panel actually in place. So I got these to start, but I'm going to have to go, I should have measured these before I pulled that tape off. So now this one's got to be thicker. It's going to go up a lot still. Let's go here. Could have had my clamps ready too, but yeah. I'm just going to try with those top screws in, just to make sure before I go drilling more holes into this panel. Just to see how it kind of lands. That is pretty darn close. I'm happy with that. The top one's good. Bottom one needs, it definitely needs some work. I'm gonna mess with the bottom one a little bit and see if I can get it to kind of come up. That's a lot better, or at least it's probably about as good as it's going to get. Because there's no securement out in the middle of the panel, they can flex and move a little bit, so they are a little bit misaligned, but at least it's better than what it was, and I can live with that. So that takes care of this thing, the fridge drawer. I'm especially excited for this thing because we've never had an ice maker before, so now we have an ice maker. So there's this thing, all done. And the dishwasher is here, so we can do this one next. So the first thing I want to do is prep the cavity, and this is one of these things I didn't realize or didn't know before or think about before. I don't know, call them mistakes, oversights. I didn't quite realize how everything works out. So this line here, the face frame is the panel door, and then the actual door on the dishwasher is kind of back in here. So when you open the door, you're gonna see back to here. So this end should have been a finished end or partially finished end. I'll show you what I did over here. I painted a strip that was like a little bit more than what you're going to see, and I glued that onto a piece of plywood. So I made this side, it's already prepped for visually what you're going to see. So there should have been pocket holes on this side, and that leads me to the other thing I didn't quite realize about cabinet construction like this, is that in a drawer unit like this, you 100% do not see the interior of the cabinet at all. The drawers, or at least in my case, because I made the boxes the same size as the opening, or basically as big as you can get them, you can't see anything of the interior. So these pocket holes could have been on the inside, and that would have been fine. There's no reason why they had to be on the outside to hide them, because you literally will never see the inside of the cabinet. So to kind of remedy this, I just made this little filler piece, which I'll glue on here, and that'll just kind of clean up this end, and then we can start getting the dishwasher installed. Okay, next thing on the to-do list is to install this pan. So this is a little bit of cheap insurance in case there is a leak in here. This unit does have leak detection in it, so on the underside here, there's a float. So if there's any water that leaks internally here and lands on the bottom of the bottom panel of the dishwasher, that float will rise, tell the dishwasher there's a leak, and then you can kind of deal with it that way. But just in case, fairly cheap insurance. This is a bent up stainless steel pan. So if there is any leaks, it falls on the pan and kind of comes forward so you can see that there's a leak and protects the floor underneath it, especially in the case of a slow leak where you don't really see the water coming forward. This will be a better surface than a hardwood floor getting a consistent slow leak. So these things come in a 25-inch width for a 24-inch dishwasher. So my opening is not going to work because my cabinet side goes down almost all the way to the floor. So I got to cut that back so I have room to install this thing kind of underneath this upright cabinet. And then I have all of the plumbing lines in the back of the cavity, which I think there'll be enough clearance between between the lines and the dishwasher as I slide it in, but I have to make sure I get this thing underneath the lines to get this pan back far enough so that my toe kick actually works out later on when I install that. So I'm not quite back far enough up top here, but down below I am. I still have to plumb this thing and level it to the right height and everything. So I think once I do that, that'll kick the top back enough so that the panel will go on and have enough room for me to just tweak it forward a little bit to bring in the whole thing into flush. So I think next is going to be to set the leveling feet in the right position. Okay, that feels like it's in roughly the right spot, so I'm going to go ahead and start prepping the panel to get that ready to go on. So just like the other one, this one's got a template for drilling the holes for mounting it. I feel a little bit more confident about this one just because it's one panel going onto one unit, so I can adjust the whole unit to make the gaps set correctly. Whereas on this one, you have to somehow get them both individually to line up correctly. And there's no adjustment at all on that one. You can adjust the whole unit, but you can't adjust one drawer versus another one. Let me figure out how this is supposed to work now. This way. Now is it on? It might be on. I don't know. It's hella too low, that's for sure. That's good to know. Okay, well, I'm gonna take this off and yeah, I'll move all those clips up. What am I caught on now? Oh, there's a shim here. Okay, had a little bit of a shim there, but there we go. Now it's closing at almost right. It's like maybe a little bit too high, which is great. I can bring the whole unit down and I can work on getting it flush up on the face and in the right position before actually attaching it to the cabinets. The picture instructions say there's a little adjustment here on the side, so I can move the panel left to right if needed. So I can get it pretty close, and then if I need to adjust it side to side, I can do that later after it's attached to the cabinet. So I think I have this kind of as close as it's going to be as far as like the up and down alignment goes and in and out. It needs to go to the left a pretty good amount, and I looked at the instructions again, and I guess I misinterpreted the picture because these screws on the side don't actually do any adjustments. They just lock the panel to the door, so there is no actual adjustment on this whole thing aside from adjusting the entire dishwasher. And I can't seem to make it go to the left, so I think what I'm going to do, I have it in and out where it needs to be, so the dishwasher gets screwed to the cabinets through the screw holes here on the side. So I'm going to try and use these on this side to help me pull the unit to the left to hopefully get my gaps more consistent, because the gap on this side is absolutely ginormous. Okay, I'm not super duper happy with it, but that's where it's going to be, and I am emotionally done with this. It's plenty well good enough. Okay, I'm going to make the connections under here, and I guess make sure it works. And then I got to look at how the toe kick plate thing goes on there. I don't really want to set up an app for this. Skip. Yes. I don't know what time it is. Sure, we got one of those right now. Oh, okay. So this is how the kick plate normally works. It just gets screwed on to those mounting brackets, which allows you to set the in and out position. I don't like that it's black, and it's got to interface with what's going on over here and deal with the pan being here as well. So I'm going to leave this kick plate situation until the next episode where we deal with all the kick plates in the kitchen. So now moving on to the appliance garage. I have a few things to finish up here to get this thing all done. So if you remember back to when we built the appliance garage, I have this pocket door hardware thing, and if you follow me on Facebook or Instagram, you may have seen my stories of the struggles of getting this hardware mechanism to get this door in here, but I got it in. It's closing consistently, so my gaps are where they're supposed to be, and that's all looking good. There is still some drag in the mechanism for somewhere. This is supposed to automatically pull itself in, and it's not doing that, so I will have to figure that out later. But at the very least, as far as we're concerned right now, the door is where it needs to be, so that I can cut the drawer faces where they need to be, and we still need some drawers down here before we can do drawer faces. So the plan is to have 3 drawers down here in the appliance garage. I already built the bottom 2 drawers. These guys here, they're just big giant boxes, just like everything else we've seen. But the top drawer, I want to do something a little bit different for. Since this is the land of the appliances, I want the top drawer to have this little doodad in the back of it, so there is an outlet inside the drawer. That way we can leave the blender base in that top drawer, and whenever you want to blend something, just pull the drawer out, put the thing on, blend it, put it away. For a blender, it seems like a better option than having that base left out in the garage or taking it out and putting it away every single time you want to use it. This will be a little more convenient when we want to do that. So luckily, this is fairly simple and a lot simpler than I thought it was going to be. So we have 1 drawer box to make down in the shop that just basically is exactly the same as these ones. So a little bit less deep because I need room for this thing in the back of it, and the back of the drawer box just has a cutout for this thing. So we'll make 1 drawer real quick, and then we'll be back up here. Maybe around there or something here. Okay. I think right around there is going to be good. I figure the blender will be kind of in this corner like this with the buttons facing this way. And then that will give us room to put plug it in right there without it being too low or too high. I'm going to go a little bit lower. Yeah, maybe I'll go down to here or something. I should still leave enough meat on the bottom, I think, so we'll come down to there. Kind of tuck it towards the left side. So I got this thing which has all the measurements on it if you wanted to actually stick this on here and cut it out manually. But because this piece is still separate, I can actually make these cuts probably, for the most part, on the table saw and have them come out nice and straight. Even though it doesn't matter, because this plate covers all your inaccuracies and waviness in your cuts. But you know, it's me. Okay. Okay, so there are all of the panels for the appliance garage ready to go off the paint. Everything still needs to be adjusted, but I'll worry about that later once I get them painted and done. So presto changeo, now it's painted. So there it is. The appliance garage is all kind of complete and pretty well ready to go. The pocket door works as far as like retraction goes. It still needs to be adjusted a little bit because it does stop a little early, but this is so much better than what it used to be. It also doesn't quite close all the way yet, but as with the drawers, everything needs some adjustment, so whatever. So now we have all of our appliances in this one cabinet. They're really nicely organized. They're all right here. And then when you don't want to see them anymore, you just close that thing and you say goodbye to them. And with the appliance garage finally finished and in place, you can see one detail that I've been referencing for the longest time, that the fridge and the appliance garage bookend that run of cabinets along the wall. So that finally takes care of the appliances. This part of the whole project has been the longest road of basically everything. Back in episode 9 is when we started on appliances. We went out and had a look to figure out what appliances we wanted and what sizes we wanted them to be. And we need to have that information before we could actually do the planning and layout of all the cabinetry, because the cabinetry kind of lays out around the appliances that you actually want. So for instance, one of the decisions we had to make was, do we want wall ovens or do we want an appliance garage? We went with the appliance garage. But that was a decision that had to be made back in the day. We also had the choice between a 30 and a 36-inch fridge, and we went to the 36, and that obviously impacts the layout along this wall. So that is going to do it for this one. Thank you, as always, for watching. I greatly appreciate it. If you have any questions or comments on what did we just do, appliances or whatever, please feel free to leave me a comment. As always, I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have. And until next time, happy woodworking.